Hey guys, what is going on? It is Brook, or the Undead DM. I'm back at it again with another rant video for today. This one's going to be a little bit different because I actually have some gameplay in the background for you. Just decided to add this in for no particular reason. I figured I'd give you guys something to look at while we were talking about. So, in today's episode, I want to talk about 4th edition. Yeah, I know, controversial. Everyone wants to talk about 4th edition nowadays. But yeah, I really want to talk about 4th edition because I'm actually beginning a 4th edition, um, not homebrew, but a 4th edition one shot here in the next couple days, and I want to talk about it. So, I think 4th edition is very well designed. I think 4th edition is very well tested, as much as people like to say that it's not. I think it is very well tested, and in general, it's one of the better editions. But that's not what we're here to say today. I think the problem with 5th edition and OneD&D and what I see going into the future is the lack of diversity. What do I mean by this? Well, when you look at something like 3.5, as abysmal as it was, in terms of balancing their classes in general, as well as balancing their feat system and how powerful certain characters could get, I think 3.5 and 3rd edition in general was just abysmal in that fact. 4th edition kind of remedied this, but to a very, very positive degree. And how they did that is they made the roll system, as everyone knows. And the roll system, I think, fixed a lot of issues that people had with 4th edition. Or had not 4th edition, sorry. A lot of issues people had with 3rd edition, which, looking back upon it nowadays with the introduction of 5th edition and OneD&D, people seem to have this weird sense of nostalgia for 3.5 and have this sense of dread when they speak about 4th edition, as if it's like sort of taboo to talk about, or that it's bad to talk about. Because if you do, then you're one of those people who's going to do nothing but talk about 4th edition, and you're going to sit there and you're going to vouch for it, all the while not realizing how quote-unquote terrible the system is and how video gamey it is. But I digress. I think the issue with 5th edition and 4th edition, or the issue with 5th edition and OneD&D, is, and what I see going forward, is the lack of willingness to add more classes. They seem to have in their mind that any idea, any class function, any sort of thing they could possibly think of that would be constituted as a good idea class-wise can just be made into a subclass and it will work the same. When in reality, that is not the case at all. Like, let's take for example, the tanking class. Like, name one class in 5th edition that is specifically designed for tanking. Everyone will obviously say, well, the barbarian, it's meant to do that. Yes, but realistically, only one or two subclasses really fulfill the niche of tanking subclass, and that would be like Oath of the Ancestral, or a Path of the Ancestral Guardian, and in very rare instances, the Wild Magic, if you get the right roll, or you choose to get the correct roll. But other than that, there's not really a tanking role in the game for the sake of, like, I am the defender, I stand in front of everybody, and I make sure nobody goes past me to hit my allies. There's not anything like that in 5th edition if you discount the um, if you discount the Sentinel Polar Master Gish right there. If you disregard that, then there's nothing really there for a lot of marshals to do that be the defender. Meanwhile, in 4th edition, they had an entire role dedicated to defending people. They had different builds, like with Fighter, they had freehand grappling builds to lock down single enemies harder. They had temporary HP builds to make you tougher. They had 2 weapon builds because I prefer 2 weapon builds. Big two-handed weapon builds. And they had builds specifically made to be the defender. Their entire purpose was that nobody could get past them. And fighters did that very, very well. And as a YouTuber once said, I'll link his video in the description below. In a one-on-one fight, a fighter is who you want. They could deal the most amount of damage compared to any other defender, relatively. They have the most versatility, and they are overall the best in a 1v1. And I think that's fantastic. But on the other hand, with the Barbarian, you don't get that. It's just, you either go Ancestral Guardian or you go nothing. And also, what about the healers? What kind of healing do you get in 5th edition? You get Life Domain Cleric, Life Berry, you get a few others, but healing isn't that good in 5th edition, and honestly, from what I'm reading, it's not that good in 4th edition either. But at least 4th edition, everybody sort of has the pseudo once per short or long rest second wind healing that the fighter gets. It wasn't a fighter exclusive in 4th edition. Everybody got healing surges, and therefore everybody could be a tank. And that was kind of the fun part, is that everybody was strong, but nobody was overpowered, so to speak. I think in 4th edition healing, they realized it wasn't going to be that good. And so what they decided to do instead was that they decided to make healing as prevalent as possible. This way there isn't going to be one solo class dedicated to healing and does nothing else. Like, a lot of the leaders have abilities that damage people, and they also allow a person to expend a healing surge. That's really, really good. But on the same front, in 5th edition, if you want a good healer, Life Domain Cleric, and pretty much either go Ranger or Druid, get good berry, and boom, you're done. Got one of the best healers of the game right there. Pardon me, it's 2:30 in the morning, but you got all these options, and that's what makes it fun. And also, I'm not even going to get into Paragon Paths or Epic Destinies and how much fun those can be from what I've read. But from what I've read, they sound amazing. And that offers a lot more variety than people are willing to admit. They like to say, oh, there's not a lot of diversity in 4th edition. Because in 4th edition, all you do is you're stuck as this one class, and there's not really a lot of diversity. It's like, yes, there is. With 5th edition, you're stuck as a Ancestral Guardian Barbarian. You cannot go past that. And I know what you're saying, well, isn't that what Paragon and Epic Destinies are? Well, yes, in a way. but there's a big difference. You get your Paragon path at like level 11, and you get your Epic Destiny at level 21. So you really have time to explore your options before committing to something. If you find that in a lot of fights or in the beginning you want to be the stalwart defender, the front line to the front line shield and or sword and board fighter, but then later on you find out that due to the two leaders you have in your party, you don't really have to focus that hard on being in the front, and instead you could focus more on DPS and damaging them down. So you can go into that build, and then you could just do that. You don't have to stick with your standard build. You can go and expand your horizons into something else. And I think that's great. I think that's fantastic. But at the same time, in 4th edition, it's very, very. Or, apologies. It is extremely easy to get. Pardon my Gen Z phrasing, but it's easy to get lost in the sauce. Where there are so many feats and there are so many abilities that you could pick from. There are so many ways to play that it's not really reasonable that everybody will be able to play every single build in a very quick manner. I think that's fantastic. But my point, where is it? I have lost it. I apologize. My point is, in 4th edition, they added classes in Player's Handbook 1, then they added more in Player's Handbook 2, then more in the Player's Handbook 3, and eventually they started releasing other, granted not as good, but still pretty decent material in other later books and magazines. And those were pretty fun, and those were pretty good. And then Essentials came out as sort of their transition to 5th edition, where they were like, okay, people are complaining that they have to choose between all these powers and to do what at what times, and it's overloading their brains, and they just want a her hit thing simulator. So let's just make these essentials classes and make it so dumbed down that they get one power, maybe two, that they get more uses of as they go on, but their primary focus is on basic attacks. They just take their weapon and they put it into the face of the enemy. That's it. There's not any complexity to it. And that's how it was in 3.5 too. It was just you put your weapon into the dude's face and there was no thought process put into it. In 4th edition, you actually have to use your brain. You actually have to look at your character sheet and think about what you want to do, rather than just going, I cast Fireball, or I walk up to the dude and I smack him twice with my axe and then I'm done. There's actual thought now. And I guess people just didn't like having to think when playing D&D. That's my thought anyway, is that when 4th edition came out, apparently people just didn't like thinking or anything to do with critical thoughts, critical decision making, anything of the sort. Otherwise, they would see a complex game, quote unquote complex game like 4th edition, and rejoice at how good it was. But they didn't. And that's what's disappointing. Is that 4th edition didn't last very long, and I think it's the fault of the players at the time. In that they just straight up did not want a game that required them to think. And that if it did, that would suck. They just wanted to hit things. And it seems like in OneD&D, they're not going back to that. So once again, they're just scared of adding more classes. They think that everything can be solved with subclasses. You want to play a Scion? Here's some Psionic subclasses. You want to play an Avenger, here's a Paladin subclass. You want to play a rune carver, I think is what it's called. Here's a barbarian subclass. It's just not fun. You can actually have those unique interactions in 4th edition. So where do I see D&D going in the next few years? Possibly even later this year is from what I understand when OneD&D is going to be released. I think OneD&D is going to flop massively. Why do I say that? Well, I think what's going to happen is that people are going to have OneD&D. They're going to realize, wait a minute, this is just 5.5. There's nothing different about this. And that's it. They're just going to say, well, I've played 5th edition, and I've played all of 5th edition, but OneD&D is just 5th edition plus. It's the new version of 3.5. And honestly, I think that's why people are getting upset and going back to 4th edition and 3.5 and even 2nd and 1st edition. Or even hell, moving on to other systems like Pathfinder, Blades in the Dark, City of Mist, Call of Cthulhu, other things like that. Hell, I've actually just been introduced to a system called Legend of the Five Rings by Cybrock. You guys know him. He's been on the channel a couple times in my description box, and I've mentioned him a couple times. Good friend of mine. At least I hope we're friends. Hi, Cybrock, if you're watching this. I hope we're friends. But if we're not, that's fine. But he introduced me to this, and it's very interesting compared to 5th edition and D&D in general. But with that being said, I'd like to thank you all so much for watching this rant episode. In case you haven't heard, because apparently I can't post on my community tab yet, I'm going to be moving soon. So these are going to become a little bit more frequent. As you've probably noticed, they're becoming a lot more frequent. Because I have to move in, so these are pretty easy to get out compared to my normal content. But hopefully once I move in, everything will go back to normal. But with that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all on the next rant episode. Latest.